All right, welcome back to the Primed Fatherhood podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Condi, and this is episode 25. About 10 years ago, I heard a quote from Winston Churchill that really stuck with me. He said, "To every man, there comes in his lifetime that special moment when he is figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered a chance to do a very special thing, unique to him and fitted to his talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds him unprepared or unqualified for that which would be his finest hour." I remember that quote hitting me really hard and making me think and feel a lot of things about how I was living my life. In that critical hour that Winston Churchill is talking about, what will make the difference between tragedy and triumph? Stay tuned as we explore the answers. We have answered the call. We are committed to a greater purpose. We are fathers. Past achievements do not guarantee future success. We will prime ourselves often to navigate each new challenge. We are capable, brave, and relentless. We will remain undaunted. In today's episode, I want to talk about the second pillar of fatherhood. It's the second word in the acronym that makes up the name of this podcast. PRIMED stands for provide, refine, instruct, manage, engage, and defend. So, why should we focus on being better? Why should we refine ourselves? Well, when you think of that quote from Winston Churchill, he kind of gives us the answer. He says, "What a tragedy if that moment finds him unprepared or unqualified for that which would be his finest hour." We must always be preparing ourselves and be qualifying ourselves for the next challenge that's coming up. There's a great quote by Charles Kettering that says, "Every father should remember one day his children will follow his example, not his advice." That in and of itself is a huge reason that we should always be refining ourselves and be trying to be better, is because it doesn't matter what we teach our kids as much as what we show our kids is the way to live, and they will follow the example much more than the advice. The next one is another quote that I really like from John Green, and he says, "The nature of impending fatherhood is that you are doing something that you are unqualified to do, and then you become qualified while doing it." It's like people always say, there's no manual for how to be a parent or how to be a dad, and really it happens to us usually when we're young and when we're trying to create a career and trying to figure ourselves out, and so we really aren't qualified when we become fathers. But that doesn't mean that we should give up, and it doesn't mean that we can't become qualified. So that's really what I want to hit on today is how do we qualify ourselves? How do we refine ourselves and become the best that we can be? And why do we need to do that? I think we've covered the why with showing that our children follow our example, not our advice, and in showing that we need to be prepared when that critical moment comes, when we are challenged with something really difficult or really special. Another reason that I think that it's really important that we're always refining ourselves as dads is when you think of what it really means when you get on an airplane and they tell you to put on your face mask before you put on the face mask of your child who is sitting next to you. It's because if you can't breathe, you can't help them to breathe, and they're too young to know what to do when they get in a situation like that. And I think that that's a great analogy for what being a refined father is. And when I wrote it as refined as part of the acronym of primed, refined wasn't my first choice for word. Disciplined was my first choice for words, but refined works great because it includes a lot of different things, and it connotes that we're just always progressing and getting better and becoming a better version of ourselves. So, what do we need to do to refine ourselves as fathers? Well, I think that it starts with our mindset, and I literally want to start with the book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And there's some questions in here that I want to ask you, and just have you think through them, and then I'll talk about what it means as we go. So it says, answer these questions about intelligence. Read each statement and decide whether you mostly agree with it or mostly disagree with it. Statement 1. Your intelligence is something very basic about you that you can't change very much. Do you agree mostly with that or disagree mostly with it? 2. You can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. 3. No matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit. 4. You can always substantially change how intelligent you are. So do you mostly agree with these statements, or do you mostly disagree with them? Just keep a mental note of that. And I will read a few more statements for you to see if you mostly agree or mostly disagree with them. 5. You are a certain kind of person, and there is not much that can be done to really change that. 6. No matter what kind of person you are, you can always change substantially. 7. You can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are really can't be changed. And 8. You can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. So if we go back to statements 1 through 4, the statements 1 and 2, your intelligence is something very basic about you that you can't change very much. And statement 2, you can learn new things, but you can't really change how intelligent you are. If you mostly agreed with those two statements, you are holding mostly the fixed mindset. If you mostly agreed with statements 3 and 4, no matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit, and you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. If you mostly agreed with those, then you're holding what Carol Dweck calls the growth mindset. And then back to those other statements, you are a certain kind of person, and there is not much that can really be done to change that. And you can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are really can't be changed. If you believe those, then your belief is what she calls the fixed mindset. And if you were agreeing with the opposite ones of that, no matter what kind of person you are, you can always change substantially, or you can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. If you agreed with those, then that puts you in the growth mindset. Now, the reason that I bring up mindset is because if someone holds the fixed mindset, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it hinders them from wanting to work on themselves or actually doing the things that make change and help them to be more productive and more willing to work on things. And if you're holding the growth mindset, then you are believing that nothing is permanent, that what you are, how smart you are, how good you are at things, is not a permanent thing that is just a fixed talent, but it's something that you can improve and work at. And so I just wanted to bring this book to your attention. If you haven't ever read it, or if it's been a while since you've read it, it's always worth going through. Because the truth is that you don't just harbor one mindset your whole life all the time. You can grow up with a growth mindset, but then you can fall back into a fixed mindset, and you can get into these ruts and be stuck and not be doing the things that you need to improve. Or vice versa, you can grow up with the fixed mindset, thinking that your lot in life is what you got and there's no way to change it. And that can really make you struggle, but then there can be flashes of greatness where you harbor the growth mindset and you do great in one little area. And the real important part of the book, Mindset, is that it just helps you to recognize where you're at, and it pushes you to get yourself into that growth mindset so that you can be happy with learning, and you can be happy with failure, and you can continue to push yourself and grow, rather than feeling like you do when you're in the fixed mindset, like you only have what you have and you have to prove that that's good enough all the time. That's a much harder way to live, and it is a damning way to live, because it really puts you in a position where you don't feel like it's worthwhile to try and get better at things, or to change things about yourself, or to put in the effort to get better results. And so I just wanted to bring up briefly the power of mindset. And I'm the first to recognize that even though I like to think that I keep a growth mindset, I often catch myself in a fixed mindset when things are getting hard, or when it's taking a long time to complete something. And so I have to remind myself of this often, but it really does make a big difference. And the thing that I really wanted to point out is that all of the research that Professor Dweck did in creating mindset, and all of the supporting literature that comes after it, like the book called Grit from Angela Duckworth, and there's all these supporting studies that show the difference in the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. To me, all of that just shows that we can always become better, and that the power of the mind is really much more potent than we normally give it credit. And when you look at it, there's evidence all around us. There's athletes that I'm watching in the extreme sports world who literally will their way back to health from having a debilitating injury that makes them a quadriplegic. And all of a sudden, because they're so determined and they're so positive and they're pushing themselves so hard, they start walking and doing what they used to do before. And then you see examples of people like Viktor Frankl, who was able to control his mind so well while in a concentration camp that he could find peace in the most horrible setting you could imagine. Or someone like Aaron Ralston from 127 Hours, where he got stuck in a slot canyon not far from where I live here in southern Utah, and the boulder pinned his arm to the wall, and he literally had to cut his own arm off in order to get out and to survive. the power of the mind is incredible if we can focus it and if we allow ourselves to push our own limits. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we need to recognize that we can always be better, that there's a need for us to become better and to push ourselves and to grow, but that it's also I just want to make the point that it's possible. Because a lot of times we just feel like we're stuck in a rut, or like we just do the same things over and struggle, and it is possible to break it. You just have to come at it with a different approach. So the next question is, as dads, what is the most important thing for us to work on? And this is a tricky question, and it's an individual question. It's something that you just have to think about, but I can give you some generalizations of things that I think we typically struggle with, and things that can always help us in our role as fathers, as well as in our roles as professionals and leaders and managers and coaches and mentors and teachers. I think the first thing that we can always be better at is to become more disciplined. And there's people out there who will say, you don't need to be more disciplined, you just need to be more focused on one thing. And that's an interesting way of looking at it, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. But in my own life, the times that I've struggled the most were the times that I was the least disciplined. And the way that I came out of it was by getting more disciplined. And when I'm talking discipline, it's not any one thing, but it all kind of adds up. And if you can discipline yourself in one area, you can create a habit there and then roll that success into another area that you need to be more disciplined in, and create habits there, and then roll that momentum into the next area. And that's a great way to do it. But if you can grow your discipline to quench your thirsts for the things that take you down bad paths, then that's a great start. If you can grow more discipline to focus longer on your work and on the things that you need to do, then that can yield great fruit. If you can grow your discipline to keep you away from the people who drag you down, then that's a great help. Discipline really only strengthens you, and there's tons of awesome information out there. And like I've mentioned in past ones, one of my favorite books is The Willpower Instinct. That is a really great one to help you to create a little more discipline and strength in your life. Another area I think that would really serve all dads is to focus on recognizing and controlling your fears. And I've read recently an awesome book called Fear is Fuel by Patrick Sweeney, where he talks about there's 3 kinds of fears, and you need to be able to control all 3 kinds. There's physiological fears or physical fears, there's emotional fears, and there's instinctual fears. And he goes into lots of depth and talks about how your fear center, the amygdala, the part of your brain that's the oldest and the most developed early on in life, controls fear, and how your courage center, which is your prefrontal cortex, is something that you have to develop much later. But you can train your courage center to fire when your fear center fires. And if you do it well enough, often enough, then training them to fire together actually ends up wiring them together to the point that you can gain great control over your fears. And I think it's interesting that he breaks it down into those 3 areas: physical, emotional, and instinctual. Instinctual is the fight or flight side. Physical fears is anything pertaining to like actual physical danger, whether it's spiders or heights or the dark. Those are all considered the physical fears. And then emotional fears is the stuff that's related to people and ego and relationships. And he talks about how, you can have Navy SEALs who have mastered their instinctual and physical fears. They do these halo jumps where it's high altitude, low open jumps where it's incredibly dangerous over in the dark, over the ocean, just all this stuff. And these guys can go in there stone cold. But then these same Navy SEALs who have mastered that side of stuff really struggle in personal relationships and with their wife. And it's because they've spent all of this time training to master these other sides of the fears, and they've neglected the emotional side. So I think that recognizing and controlling your fears is a great place to work on as a dad. Another one is your emotional intelligence. I think that in society we put a lot of emphasis on normal intelligence, just how smart someone is, how good they are at making decisions, and how they can think critically, and what their test scores are and things like that. But we don't pay nearly enough attention to emotional intelligence. And honestly, that oftentimes goes further than your IQ, because what it comes down to is your success comes down to who you know and how you network and how you work with people and how you treat people and how you understand people and how you get people to understand you. That's all part of emotional intelligence. And that, if you don't have that, your normal intelligence will become a barrier to you. And so anything you can do to learn there, I think, is a great way to refine yourself and be a better dad. And then, like I alluded to here, becoming more critical in your thinking is another great place that I think we can all spend more time. There's books like Thinking Fast and Slow that help you to learn different ways to mental model issues and solutions that go deeper than what you would naturally do. And so those are all great places for you to work. The question is, should you work on your weaknesses, or should you refine your strengths so that you can go into that extreme expert level of mastery that takes you to the next level? And I don't think there's a right answer necessarily to this. If you just work on yourself, you give yourself time each day to work on something new, and you're making it a priority, then you'll be engaged and you'll be doing something to help to prepare you for that critical moment when you're going to be really challenged. And so if you're just working on anything, you're doing great. But when you think of that quote that says that your kids will follow your example, not your advice, that makes me think it's probably a little more important for us to work on our weaknesses and kind of couch those things up to our strengths so that we can help our kids to at least be semi-balanced and be able to see that we are working on our weaknesses. And so I think that's just the bottom line, is just that we put effort into refining ourselves, becoming more disciplined, and focusing on making sure that we're putting the oxygen mask on ourselves so that when our kids need it, we can breathe and we can think clearly enough to help them to get their mask on. So in conclusion, I really love the quote from William Shakespeare that says, "All things are ready if our mind be so." I really do believe that a lot of our challenges and a lot of our solutions to our problems come from where our mind's at. And another one from Benjamin Franklin, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." I love that. I always tell my wife I'd rather prepare and prevent than repair and repent. And she thinks it's super annoying because I talk about it so much, but I think it's a great way to think and do things. We never know when that special critical hour will come where it will be you and only you that can do that very special thing. But you can always be preparing yourself for it so that when it does come, you can avoid the tragedy and you're able to be the family leader that you were meant to be. I just want to challenge you to pick a weakness and make a plan to get stronger in that area. Make your goals and plans smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, and then just get after it. And if you found that you may have a fixed mindset, I think that would be a great place for you to start. I'll leave a link to the mindset book in the show notes here. And that book, if you haven't been through it, really is a revelatory thing to go through and learn how you can change your thinking and change your whole life. So I really appreciate you listening to this podcast episode. If you found it helpful, please share it with someone who you think it will be helpful for. Please leave us a rating on Apple or Google, wherever you're listening. And don't forget to subscribe to Primed Fatherhood. Stay tuned to the next episode where we'll talk about the third pillar of fatherhood. And remember to keep coming back to this podcast to stay primed.